Okay, now let's discuss about one another plugin, that is move model plugin. So in this plugin, we'll move a box in Z direction. Okay, so let's understand how to write this plugin, and also everything that we learned on last video. I'm not going to repeat those common things over here. We'll just talk about the specific things that's related to this plugin. Okay, so make sure if you haven't watched the previous video, you watch the previous video before going forward. Okay, so let's first see what's there in the h file. These are the all same things that's there. Now we are going to use linear velocity, and this, because of this, all these are there. Okay, even before explaining you this, let's first understand how I get what component to use and how to use it. So even before even writing any plugin, generally what you do, you go over here and you'll search for, because we are going to send a linear velocity, let's see what are available ones. So if you search here, you'll find this available ones. This is linear velocity. This is linear velocity is one that's available. You see here linear velocity is available, but whenever linear velocity, this means it's for reading. Whenever this cmd is mentioned, it's for writing on to that linear velocity component. Okay, so because we have to write on it, because we want to move the model, right? So we have to write on that component. So because of that, we are going to use this is one thing. So always you need to check for things that you need before even start coding. Just check the component, what are the available components. Okay, for example, over here also, if we write model, oh, so there is something called model class available on here. Will it work? So we'll see in the code, like, will it work or not. So generally, I'm saying the general approach is you should always look into the documentation first and see what are the options that's available. Then we'll try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Okay, so now, as I was saying, we are going to use this linear velocity command. So this is included, and then we are also going to use name, and then for registry is there. This is common thing. The only thing that we have added this time is we are getting the model name. We now using this velocity thing, and the target entity is the entity that is attached to. Now other thing on this is, so we could have made it a model, we could have attach it to a model, but we are not attaching it to a model, we are directly attaching it to world. Okay, so now we'll use a different approach. In video number before this video, if you remember, in print plugin, we use this way. That's why I have the snippet code. So we directly use this method where we're using this model entity to get this pointer to the model. That was easy to find the model entity. In this option, we are going to search the entity by its name. So let's see how to do that. We'll see how to do that. Before that, let's go back to this, and yep, so we'll see method number 2. But before, let's understand how the SDF thing is. In last video you understood this entity thing, right? In this, now understand how SDF thing is there. So SDF thing, when you write configure, and this SDF actually points to this, model plugin. I can show you this SDF file as well, move model world plugin. Sorry, this is the world file. So on this world file, you will see the pointer is actually the SDF pointer is actually pointing this to. So everything inside it can access using that SDF pointer. Okay, so we can access this model name, we can access this jet velocity. That's what means over here. So you can access all of this that's there in this. And now on the code also, if you see what it is doing using this SDF pointer, we're checking, does it have model element? Yes, it has model element. What is its name? The name is test cube. So, and also then we are checking, does it have what, another z velocity? So z velocity, we are also defining a velocity over here. So if I change the velocity from here, the the cube is going to move faster or slow based on this input values. If I change the name, then it can attach to another model as well. Because we are using name method to get the entity, that's why I added a name over here. Okay, so how these APIs are there, even I can open this SDF API and show you. So on this SDF API, if you see, find as element, so this returns to if you find the string matching name. That's what we are doing over here. We are trying to match the string. Basically, we are checking is there or not. Same goes with the get. If you have that, then get is it takes in a constant parameter, okay, and that would be a string key. Then we are putting a string over here. So this is that API. So this is function overloading. So you're using this string, and this is the template class. So this template is being mentioned on this. So this is the same thing we applied on this, same thing on this. If that is there, then it is going to work. If that is not there, it is going to return. Simple thing. Now here comes the most interesting part of it. So now this time we are directly attaching this to the world plugin. How we'll get the model entity? We'll get it by using name. So as I was saying in last video as well, the logic over here is that we need to first find the entity, that this value is the entity. And how are we going to use? We are going to use this name. We already know the name, right? So we have already entered the name that comes from here. This name is mentioned over here. No? From there you can get this name cube. So this name cube will say find those component which has this name cube. Like we are going to say that we know the component and component of type name and its value is this. Then find the entity. So it is going to find this entity. It's simple like that. There is another method that how you find the entity. Okay, now let's go a little bit down, and then what I just said, it is how it is also finding the entity by name. So if you look into entity component manager, this is also coming from here. If I show you in the code, this pre-update, this entity component manager there, this ECM is coming from there. Okay. So the name that says over here, that says entity by name, is basically part of entity component system. So here it's saying entity by name. Yep. So this is the one that takes in string. Okay, this is how you find the things that you need. So first you have to understand that how to get the entity. We can use this sort of a method as well. So here we are using that method coming from ECM, entity component manager, entity by name, and we are giving the name, and the name is coming from here, model name that we have assigned. See, this model name we have assigned to this model, and this names come from here. Then we assign the name, and it and now the interesting thing over here is that on this, if you remember the concept that I told you, more entity by name, this is standard optional. If you see the standard optional, because it's standard optional, because of that, if you remember the second video where we were discussing C++ concepts, I told you that if there is standard option, we have to use has value to know if there is value or not. If it's not value, then it will say no, it's not there, and then we use the value to get the target entity. This is the same example that I gave over there as well. So I hope you understood this part. And then once you have this, we have to see on this, there is no linear velocity component attached over here. Okay, but we have to move the model, then we have to use linear velocity command to move it. So we'll first attach that linear command velocity thing. So the step is that we first attach this component, we first attach, and we have to attach every time because it doesn't keep on it. So every time we are going to set this up, and then we are going to set this z velocity from here. Okay, so we are going to set this linear velocity command at every time. So there are two methods to do it. Let's discuss that. So the methods are, the method number one is also very simple. It is also coming from the component. So we have to go again back to component. When I remember this, I can show you by this also. So if you see this component, what it does, it takes in the entity and returns you the component. The same thing that we did last time. It takes in the component and returns you the component attached to it. If so, here linear velocity component, is it attached? Because it was not attached earlier, so this will always give you false, that the component is not attached. Because this is not attached, we have to attach this component. So that's why we are doing create component. Create component is also here. So create component. Because this component doesn't exist, we first need to create component. And then we need to just put in the component name. We have to just create component in the entity component, and which type of component it is. So here the component type is also mentioned. The component type is this. So we have to put the component type. So that's what's coming from there. The syntax is like this. And then we create the component. And every time we have to create the component, because linear velocity command is never going to stay there. It's not reading, it's writing, right? So it's always created component every instance. So if we uncomment this line, then it's going to print continuously. I will uncomment this line and show you as well. So once we have this component created, this is component. Okay, now what we have to do, we have to firstly make a velocity of this jet, because this component, if you remember, let's get back to that component thing. This component actually takes vector 3D. What it takes vector 3D. Because of that, we have to make a vector 3D over here, because it takes vector 3D, and its data type is vector 3D. Because of that we created this vector 3D thing. And then using this vector 3D, we assigning to data. So if you remember the component thing on the last video, if you go inside this components, I hope now the things are getting connected by them. So, and you're able to understand things, how they're connected. So this is component, and in the component you have this data, right? This data is coming from there. We already discussed this in last video. The only thing is this time we are changing the velocity of that component. Okay, this is method number 1, where we first create the linear velocity command component, and then we use this mutable method to change the value of that component. So basically what we are doing is, so if this earlier this value was, let's say it was 0 0 0, then every instance what we do, we create the component again, then we assign 0 0 0 and let's say 0.5, and we do it every other instance. We again do the same, because component doesn't exist, we have to do this. And if you go down over here as well, it is also doing the same thing. The next method is set component data. So instead of doing this lot of effort from creating the component, looking for it, and then assigning the values, then we can directly make it in the same code. We can make it in 2 line using this set component data. So it is ECM, so obviously it will also be in ECM. Set data, my bad. What is the name? Set component data. Yeah, so set component data takes in the entity and then takes the data. So we are giving over here the entity and the data, and this is also a template class. So because this is a template class, you need to give the component type to it. And what is the component type? Our component type is this is the component type, right? So I hope now these 2 methods are very clear to you. And also, once you have followed this tutorial till now, then you will be very clearly able to understand how components are being used, how it is being created, what APIs are being used to make those components up. Okay, then there is one more method that I was talking about on the base class, that we find one more method, right? We find this model thing. So if we go inside this model, the thing is, this model is actually a wrapper around entity component system. It's written over here. This class is a wrapper around entity component system. So they were trying to make something like similar to Gazebo Classic. If you remember, the Gazebo Classic has model and all those things, but here and everything revolves around and put entity component system, and we use entity component manager to manage everything, right? So here they try to do the same thing with this. So instead of using like this, they are using this to fill the entity and then get the name. So in our case, we could also use this method, like we put the entity, then we got this model, right? We got this model. Then in this place, we can set this up. But the problem is this API doesn't exist. So this method is not very much reliable. Even Gazebo team has not internally maintained this method. So if you go on the migration documentation, you will find this set linear velocity. Yeah, so this is this method and it's still to do. So this method can many of the time harms, and it's of no use. If you really understand the entity component system, this is no more needed. Even on the light, when we discuss light plugins, we'll discuss this method, and it can be sometimes very dangerous because this method is not very well maintained. So I highly don't recommend to use this wrapper thing. When it's model, you will also find it for light and for other things, links, everything is there, but they haven't maintained it properly. So I will never recommend to use this. And you also don't need to use it because you understand the entity component manager thing and how to use it to manipulate component data or read them. So do not need to use this, and the build and run process still remains the same. So let me once go back to the code and show you the code. So this is the code. It's still in standard Gazebo Sim plugins, standalone Gazebo Sim plugins. We have this move model system plugin. It's a system plugin, right? So inside this we have the C++ code, this H file, this I just explained you, and then the C++ code, the same thing that we just learned. And then let me uncomment this, and I've already done everything for you. So if you just launch, we'll able to launch it. But let me go to build because I've added this, and I will make it once more so that we start to get this print out. Although that looks annoying, but it's fine. Yep, the model that we are using over here is model. This is the SDF file. We have added this, nothing special, everything is same, just we added this plugin. Okay, now let's launch it. So even on launch, you will see you'll get this print. Whenever the model plugin started, you will see this plain. The model name is test cube because we added some prints on here that found model entity and the entity number, and okay, and these prints are coming over here, and desired z velocity. We have set this up. We are getting this prints from here and this prints from here. Now once we start playing this model, this is going to move with the speed of this, and you saw this moving, right? And then it is every time going to create this model. Let me also tan open, if I can open this model. So you see this, we have added this linear velocity component. So if this component is there, that's why the sprint is not coming. If otherwise not there, then it's going to continuously come. So this linear velocity command, which is moving the model continuously, and also on the code. Yep. So if it is there, it's not going to print. Because it's there, it's not printing. So interesting thing is, like, if I click on this, if I click on the model, and if I rotate it up, because it's moving in the z direction, still going to move in z direction because the z direction is now is this. So that's the thing that I'm just showing you. Even if you do the same with second option, like just comment entirely this code and then uncomment this part of the code, it's the same thing. Here we are just not checking if component is there. We're directly using entity component system set component data that's by default available, right? So we'll again go to build and we'll come back and we'll launch it, and you say it's seeing the founded 8 because this entity value is 8 and it's moving. So this is how it's done. Simple. I hope you understood this entire tutorial, and now you're much more clear with how to write system plugins and how to play around component to make our system plugins.